In this part we'll look at the second panel of rigging, that's link and constraints. Well, the first option is auto rig and OK. This option automatically does the rigging operation for the skeleton you've created. It automatically detects what type of rigging is best for what kind of skeletons. Well, let's first use humanoid skeleton. Well, our skeleton is created. To use auto rig tool, we first select our skeleton, then click on auto rig button. Let me close these layers so you can see them clearly. As you see, auto rig tool not only connected the skeletons but also created controllers for them, so we can easily control the character and animate it. For example, this is the controller of right hand skeleton, and this is for the left hand. If you remember, I said in the previous part, when you created the skeletons, if you move the hip one, none of the hands or feet will move, and different parts of the skeleton are completely disconnected. But now, after rigging, if you move the hip, you'll find that the skeleton is completely rigged and all the parts are connected. Well, let's go to Duik. This is the rig of humanoid skeleton. Let me delete the layers. The next option is the same. When you click arm and its skeleton is created, and in link and constraints panel you apply auto rig option on the skeleton, auto rig tool will do the rigging operation based on what type of skeleton is created, how it's parented, and what settings are used for it. It will create FK, IK, or what it prefers. And don't think that the rigging it uses for arm is the same rigging it creates for leg, spine, or tail. No, the function of auto rig tool varies depending on the skeleton each of them has. Well, let's go to a setting. The first option you see in auto rig settings is bake structures. Bake structures, just like bake appearance, is in edit option of structures panel. We set the expressions and settings are made behind the scenes so the appearance of the skeleton can be changed, such as color, size, and so on. By click on this option, this expression will be deleted to make the skeleton lighter. This option does the same job. When this option is checked and you click auto rig, the color and size of the skeleton cannot be changed anymore. For example, I wanna change the color of this one, so I come here and change the color. All its features are changeable because the expression has not yet been deleted. But when I come here and this option is checked and then select the skeleton and click auto rig and bake structure will be applied on it, its color cannot be changed anymore. For example, I select this one and set its color orange. As you see, no changes are made. Let's go to the second option. By clicking on the left of this option, it shows three options. The first option is prefer standard IK. This option makes auto rig tool prefer standard IK in rigging the skeleton and use standard IK whenever possible, but not other types of rigging. The second option prefers FK overlap, and the third option prefers Bezier IK. What's the difference between these types of rigging? I'll explain. Let me delete this skeleton and its rig and create another hand skeleton. Let's go to the Duik and auto rig settings. Now I choose the first option, prefer standard IK. That is, I set it to prefer standard IK for rigging. And I click auto rig option. Sorry, I should first select the layers of the skeleton. I should prefer standard IK here and then click auto rig. As you see now, this is rigged exactly the same as the previous time. Auto rig creates IK. As you can see, IK is enabled. And it's also created FK for it. But until IK is enabled, FK won't be available. And when you disable IK, FK will be enabled. Let me undo that to go back to the state before rigging. This time we try prefer FK overlap option to see if any changes will happen in the rigging of the hand or not. As you see, no changes are still made and its rigging is the same style as before. I said that's because when you use the default skeleton, for example, humanoid, arm, leg, spine, and tail, auto rig doesn't consider the option you selected here, and it uses automatically some specific rigging for each of the default skeletons, and doesn't consider these options anymore. Then what's this option for? This option is only for the cases that you use custom option. Now I'll show you. Well, I delete these layers. Custom, for example, will create 3 bonds. Now 3 bonds are created for me. I go to the Dui, auto, and now for example, first I choose prefer standard IK to see what the standard IK is about. We select the skeletons and click auto. As you see, it's now created a standard IK for us. Well, I undo that to go back to the first state. Now let's try FK overlap. We select the skeleton layers and click auto. As you see, it is completely different. Now my controller is not here any longer. That's here. If I move it now, no changes are made anymore. And now if we want to see the difference between IK and FK, we can find it so easily. Because in IK, a controller is created in the end of the bonds that by changing its position, the joints will rotate. But in FK, no changes are made in the joints anymore by changing the position of the controller. Let me go to effect controls. In FK, we only work with rotation, and we don't work with changing the position anymore. As you see, this is FK overlap. The curve option rotates the skeleton totally. And each of the joints can also be rotated with this option separately. Well, this is FK overlap. Let me undo that to go to the next option. Then prefer Bezier IK option creates Bezier IK. I select the skeletons and click auto. As you see, IK is created here. And as I said before, IK creates a controller at the end of the bonds that by changing its position, the skeleton will rotate. The only difference between this IK and the standard IK is that this is Bezier. Bezier means to be curved. This IK creates a controller in the middle of a skeleton so we can easily curve the skeleton. This IK is mostly used for the situation you want to animate animal state. Both Bezier IK and FK overlap are used for animal state. The next option is auto rig, that's clear. Then we reach the next section, IK and FK. I think it has already become clear to you what's the difference between IK and FK. However, I'll give you a brief explanation. For example, I create an arm skeleton. Then we go to the Duik and click auto rig option. It can also be done from outside. I click auto rig. That was a mistake. I press Ctrl Z. First you must select all the layers and then click auto rig option. Now you can guess which type of rigging this is, IK or FK. As I said before, IK means making rotation in the joints by a controller that moves in position. It doesn't rotate. Yes, it makes rotation in the lower bone, but not in the upper bones, where the main joints are. When you click auto rig option in Duik Bezel, it won't create only IK for you. This is one of the best features of Duik that in addition to IK, it creates FK. Let me correct the rotation of the rest, and then we go to effect control to see how to enable FK. First, let me disable IK, then we go to FK and individual controls. Here upper item is for the arm joint, lower for the forearm, and goal for the wrist rotation. I want this joint to rotate this way, and the character's hand is to be animated this way, that is, it only rotates from the arm joints. You can make such a rotation only by FK. You cannot do this so easily by IK. Why? I'll show you. I set it to 0 and enable IK again. Let me now select the controller. If I try to make the same movement now, it will be very difficult. I go back and forth, sometimes very hard. The exact rotation that's needed to be done cannot be made by IK. One of the differences is this. So, in brief, IK is to control the joint rotation by a controller that moves in position. It doesn't rotate so that joint rotates. But conversely, FK only works with rotation that can be controlled joint by joint. FK is mostly used for situations you want to create, for example robotic arms that are very advanced, and I think it will be much more accurate with FK than IK. Well, let's delete this. Again, I enter Dwig. So far you should have found what kind of controllers IK and FK are. Well, let's go to these three options. I first create the default arm skeleton from here. As I said, if I select FK overlap and click auto-rig option, the script won't prefer FK overlap for me any longer, because it detects it as hand skeleton and prefers IK to be the best for it, not FK. But by this option you can set auto-rig aside and determine what rigging you want it to create entirely manually. For example, if I click on this option, although it is an arm skeleton and IK not FK overlap should be used to rig it, but this option creates FK overlap for it. It creates a controller at the end of the skeleton that no changes are made by changing its position, and it has all settings of FK overlap. Well, let's press Ctrl Z and go back. This one also creates IK rigging. Look at here, I select all the four skeleton and click IK. You see it creates an IK. But the IK it creates now differs from the IK created by AutoRig. It's because we have two types of IK. Well, let me press Ctrl Z and go back. Let's enter its settings so it becomes clear. Now I select the layers and enter IK setting. There are two types of IK. The first one is 1 and 2 layer IK that in fact creates two IKs for you. Now I choose 1 and 2 layer IK and click create. As you see now two IKs are created for us. This is one IK that when it rotates, this one rotates this way. And this is the other IK that when it rotates, the other one rotates another way. You see its lines are apparent. The other type of IK is 3 layer IK. 3 layer IK creates one IK for all 3 layers. Now I select the layers and click this IK. As you see, this controller connects to the last one and all 3 layers will change by one IK. When I move this, since there is one IK, all bones are rotating towards this IK. But in the last one, if you remember, one IK moves forward and the other backward. That's they move in opposite directions. Again, we go back to IK setting. Let me press Ctrl Z so the rigging turns back to the first state. Now, what should we do if we want to create IK for it manually? We first select this bone, then the forearm bone, and next the hand, and then we go to the settings and choose 3 layer IK and click create. As you see, we created exactly the same IK that AutoRig creates. So when we create it manually, we select these 3 bones and then create this IK. We don't select the last one because if we select it, the controller places here. We also set the FK overlap. The Bezier IK is also clear. For example, we select these layers and click Bezier IK. As I said, it creates a controller and the other controller in the middle of the bones to move more smoothly. Well, nothing remains. We go to the rigging of the character we created, its skeleton in the previous part. After we've done the placing of the skeleton, so we come to the rigging of the skeleton of our character. As you know, the first step to rig the character is to select the bones. So in structure panel, we click select structures, and all the skeletons will be selected. We go to links and constraints panel and click auto rig. Well, the character is rigged now. In the layers, if you see, it creates a series of layers whose names begin with C letter. These are the layers of our controllers. For example, this is for the hand, and as you can see, it works well and properly. Let me hide the character so we can see the skeleton clearly. For not letting something like this happen, that the bones are stretched and spread, we select the controller of the skeleton go to IK, and in storage disable auto storage. As you see, it can't be stretched anymore. Well, we return the controllers back to their first place. Let's go to connect the character to the bones. The first bone here is the left arm. We go to the left arm among the character layers. We connect it to the left arm of the skeleton. Then the left forearm. Next the left hand. This arm tip doesn't need to be connected. Well, after that is the right arm. The right arm layer to the bone RS arm. Then the right forearm. Next the right hand. It's also not needed. Well, we go to the left thigh and connect the left thigh layer to the left thigh bone. Then the left cuff layer to the left cuff bone. Base foot or ankle to the LS foot. These toes to the left toes. And then go to the right leg. Right thigh. Now, due to the large distance, I use it from here. The right thigh. Then the right calf. Base foot to the right foot. Next we need to connect our toe layer to this right toes. Then let's go to the hip. This is hips. This is the neck that we connect to the neck. This down body to spine 1. Up body to spine 2. And head also to head. These eyes and eyebrows are also connected to head. Now let's see how it has become. Let's go to doing, and now we don't need this skeleton to be shown anymore. So we hide it by this option. Well, we select all layers of the character and click the shy to hide them in timeline. So these are just the controllers of the character. For example, I move the hand controller. As you can see, the hand of my character now moves perfectly. This is the hand. This is the foot of the character that moves perfectly. Now I select the hip controller. This is the hip of the character. We zoom back to see the whole character. As you can see, this is the hip controller of the character moving. This is the neck. And this is the head. Well, the rig of the character will done here. Please be careful about this point that because of the process of this course is based on doing script panels and tools, I've also set the course according to the order of the panels. So naturally the next part is connector tool. But if you're looking for how to create an automatically animated character, you can go to part 17, that's walk cycle tool. Let's go to the next option, connector. This option allows you to control several properties by a master property or a controller. Well, I click on it and enter its panel. Here we have 3 controllers that I'll explain in the examples. So what do we want to do here? We want to rig this face. So when controller moves to the left, the face turns left. And when the controller moves to the right, the face turns right. And up and down. Well, first I create this controller that's suitable for rigging the face. As you see, it creates a controller here. When you click to the slider controller, the setting of the controller will show in effect controls window, so you can change its setting. I want if I move the controller to the left, the face also turns left. To do this, First we need to animate the face and create the right, left, up and down position for it. Well, before creating the position of the face, I'll give you a brief explanation about the layers created. The layers of the face are completely separate from each other. Hair back, hair front, all are completely separate. Let me show this in red color so it can easily be seen. Here I've created several mouth modes for it so I can create a talking stage with this tool. First we should parent the mouse layers to a null object. I bring it exactly on character's mouth. Parent these layers to the null object and just one animate null object. First go to the frame 5 and select the null object, hair front, nose, mustache, right eyebrow. These two are for the blink that I don't need right now. Right pupil, right eye, left eyebrow. Well, these are also for the blink that I don't need either. Left pupil, left eye. We don't need face to be animated, and we want ears to be animated, and hair back. So after select these layers, show their positions, then select the positions of the layers. Since we need to create two animations on the X and Y positions property, so we select their positions, right click and choose separate dimension. So the X axis becomes separated from the Y axis. In frame 5 I create keyframes for all axes so that the default position of the face is fixed in frame 5. I go to the first frame and select the eyebrows, eyes, nose, mustache and null object and take them to the left so it seems as it's looking to the left. I bring the hair front to the left, the hair back should go to the right a little, both of its ears should go to the right too. Then I bring its pupils to the left, so the left position of face was created. We go to frame 10 and create its right position. Well, this is done. Now we've created the left and right positions of the face. To animate these positions, first select the controller, click onto this slider so that it detects the controller, and then since we've animated the x-axis, we select it. Well, this should also be on value -100 and 100. Sorry, I made a mistake, I didn't animate the pupils. Now we select the X properties of the position and click connect to properties. By clicking on this option, the face comes to its default position while it's on frame 10. Now if I move the controller to the left and right, the face also turns consistent with the controller. But if I move it up and down, the face doesn't receive any command from the controller because we've created no settings for its up and down position. Let's go to create the keyframes for up and down position of the face. We do the same, we select the layers. Well, first up, we come here and create down position of the face. So these are done. We do the same things again. Enter the big bezel, select the controller, click onto the slider. Here we choose Y and select the Y axis we animated. And click connect to properties. As you see, the same thing happens again. Everything back to the default position. As you see, to any direction the controller moves, the face turns. Let's go to this controller. To control the blink, we use the slider controller. Well, first I click on it, I create and bring it here. Let me change the color of the controllers to make them clear. I enlarge the handle size. To make it blink, I created two eyelets here and all of them in the watch eye layer. So when I bring them up, they become apparent. Here I also select the eyelets and I select this and this one too. I show their position. I create the keyframes for them. Then I come to frame 5 and close the eyelets. I select the upper eyelets and bring them down. Also I bring the lower eyelets up. Then to control this animation by this controller, I select the controller like the last one. Let me rename it. We select the controller, we go to the connector panel and click on this option. You see now by clicking on it, it no longer shows X and Y because my controller only moves in the X axis. It doesn't like this and moves in the Y axis too. Well, I clicked it. Then I select the properties and click connect properties. As you see, the character's eyes are half open. The point here is that when in connector panel you set the minimum -100 and the maximum at 100, it means when your controller is on the left, that's -100, it actually shows your first keyframes or the beginning of your animation. And when your controller is on the right or the maximum 100, the layers of your animation are on the last keyframes. As you see, by this controller I easily create the character's blink. Well, I open its eyes. This was done. This controller also works exactly the same as the last one. Let me bring it here. Its only difference is that you can control your animation by rotating it, and there is no other difference. There it works just by moving in the x-axis, and here it's by rotating. Well, let's go to the next option or connect to opacities. That's very suitable for animating the mouth. To do this, I again use this slider control. I bring it down, rename it to mouth, and make it red to be clear. And in effect control, I enlarge its size. I also set its color pink to make it clear that it's for mouth. For this, we show all the layers of the character mouth. We select them all. First we select the controller and then click on this option. Then we select the layers and click connect to opacities. As you see, now there is only one mouth and the other mode of the mouth are hidden. And now by animating this slider you can create a talking state for your character. You see how simple it is. Well, we go to see one of the other features of this connector tool, which is also very important. Now here we want the character's arm to begin to grow bigger when its hand rises up. To do this we don't want to use this controller anymore, but we'll use the forearm itself as a controller. Well, as I said, first we should create the animation of the hand, so I start to create the animation. I set my timeline on 10 frames and I create a keyframe for its path on the normal position. Then I come to the initial frame and move the keyframes to the beginning of my timeline. On the frame 10, the arm grows bigger. Well, we created the animation of the arm. I press U key to show the keyframes. Next we go to rotate the forearm, that's in fact our controller. To do this we select the rotation of the forearm, then we click slider option. You see as I click on it, it chooses rotation as the master property and here you should enter the minimum and the maximum. What is the minimum about? Let me change the state. Well, this is the minimum. That's the first keyframe to be created for animating the arm that should be in this position. Let me round off the number and set it 16. So I set the minimum of the controller on 16 and the last number of rotation of the arm as maximum. Well, the forearm here turns up to 90 degrees, so I entered 90. No, minus 90 is true. The last amount that the forearm is going to rotate is minus 90. So we set the maximum minus 90. And then we select the path we created animation for and click connect to properties. As we see, when I bring the forearm down, the arm comes down. Since the minimum is the beginning of our animation and the maximum is the end of animation where the arm grows bigger. You see how simply this can be done. Well, this is also the animation of the arm. Let's go to the third option of links and constraints panel. Animation Blender is a tool for controlling animations and blending them by the markers. Well, let's see how it works. So click on this tool and enter its setting. Before I explain the settings, I've created a few animations for this object and I want to control its animations. Well, let me show the keyframes of all the layers. So the first animation I've created has this range. It's ranging from here to here, and my object just jumps up and down. In the second animation, it jumps up, falls down, and returns from the up and jumps. In the third animation I've created, it rotates, goes, and comes. Now we want to control these three animations by the markers. First, we restrict the work area to the range of the first animation. Well, I hold Shift key and move the indicator until it snaps on my last keyframe. I press N key and restrict the work area to my first animation. I select the keyframes and in Blender animation section, set the name of this animation. For example, it jumps, so I name it jump. I click set, and as soon as I click it, a marker called jump is created and its range is set from here to here. Let me drag the work area this side so that it becomes clear. This is the end of the marker and this is its beginning. So we saved first animation. Well, I go to the first keyframe of second animation and press B key. So the beginning of the work area sets here. Then I hold Shift key and come to the last keyframe. I press N and set the range of the second animation and select its keyframes. And here, set its name. Let's see what's happening here. Here it falls down from the top. So let's name it fall and click set. As you see, for this one, like the last one, both the name and the range of the animation are set. Let me do the same again for the third one. I first press B key on the first keyframe and N key on the last one. And name it rotate because it rotates. Here it's not like the last time that the keyframes are only for one layer, but you can introduce the keyframes of several layers as animation to Animation Blender. Well, I select the keyframes named rotate and click set. The rotate marker was created, so we saved the animations. Now, how do we control them? We go to the project panel and create a composition to control the animations from inside it. Let me name it control. Now I'm in control com. I bring my animate com inside and I go to the animation blender. So let's go to blender stop. In composition to set up, we select the composition where the object is animated. Well, we name that com animate. So select animate comp. In control from, we select the comp that we want to control our animation from. It hasn't appeared yet, so I refresh and select control comp. I'll explain this option later. And we click blend button. As soon as I click the blend button, a new layer called C Blender animates and an icon is created here. Well, I go to Effect Control panel. This is control setting. This is its color. This is its position. And this is its size. I enlarge it a bit. And this is its orientation. These aren't so important and I don't work with them. Now a new layer is created and we haven't yet created any marker on it. Let's play it. As you see, there are the animations that already existed. Well, we go to the second one and select the layer of animation blender and from layer menu add a marker. We go to a setting, write the name of any animation named before. For example, rotate and click OK. Now in this area that already was jumped and our object jumped, nothing happens anymore. As soon as we create the first marker, the animation of your object will be under the control of the markers and will no longer get command of the previous comp. Now I play and it only plays rotate animation and nothing else happens. Here I create another marker again. I double click on it, fall and click OK. As you can see, first it rotates and then it falls. Next I create a new marker here again. I name it jump. Then if I want I can create rotate again. You can create and animate any of them any number you like. Let's go to the setting of the layers itself. This is the appearance settings of the controller, such as color and size as it's clear. Here there are the animation blender settings. Well, the first option is loop. Check this option and look what happens. First rotate, then fall, then jump, and then jump again. And jump will be repeated over and over again. Now suppose I place this here. Look, once it falls and falls again. That is the distance between the markers, it continually repeats the previous animation. Look, still my rotate animation is not completed. I bring the marker of fall animation here. Look what happens. It abruptly changes to fall animation. Let me bring it back to make it clear. To avoid this, Animation Blender has an option called duration. This option blends two animations based on the time. If you set 1, it means 1 second. That it takes 1 second to blend the last animation with the next animation. 1 second is high now. Let me set it to 0.3. As you see before, it's abruptly changed to the next animation, but now it's not so. It makes itself similar to the first keyframe of the fall animation. Let's set it to 0.2. It's much better. It seems to me much more consistent with the speed of our animation. This is interpolation that's clear. To explain this option, I reset my project again to get it better. Well, we define first animations area, select it, write jump, and click set. Then in the project panel, create a comp for controlling it. OK. Bring animate comp into control comp. Here select animate comp and here control comp. Well, the first option is all animated properties. This option sets all the animation created on these properties under the control of markers. What does it mean? It means that the animation of these properties can only be run if markers have been created. Otherwise they won't be run, and since we've created just one marker here, we only can run one animation. I click it to see. Well, now before I create any marker for the layer of the animation blender, all the animations are run. But as soon as I create the marker, no animation can be run here. For example, I name it jump because the only marker we defined there was jump. First nothing happens, then it jumps, and again nothing happens at the end. And if you come here, you see all the properties are coded. Let's press Ctrl Z, and again we select the keyframes. Jump, set, here we define jump, and again create a control comp, and bring animate comp inside it. And here is true, and this is also true. And here we select control comp again. This time we choose the selected properties. Selected properties option sets only those properties we've created the marker for under control of the marker, and the rest of the properties won't be under control of the marker. I set the rest of the properties, not the rest of keyframes. It means that these keyframes are also under the control of the marker. Well, we come here, choose selected properties, and click the blend button to see what happens. If we go back to the main comp, only these two properties are coded. That is, the operation is done correctly. Well, if you note, now here are jump, fall, and rotate. As soon as I create a marker, you see that we no longer have jump and fall. Why don't we have fall? Because the keyframes of fall animation are in the range of those two properties that we set under control of the marker. Well, now we create a marker and name it jump. As we see, nothing happens here, then it jumps. Rotate animation still remains. Why? Because we haven't defined any marker for those properties. Naturally, they haven't been coded. So we don't have any control over it by markers, and when it reaches the rotate animation area, the object begins to be animated by itself and is not controlled by markers. For example, if while it's animated I bring jump marker in the middle of animation, you can see that they will blend together. In this example, the combination of animation is not very interesting, but you may get better results from animation combination of examples such as walking, running, and standing of the character. Let's go to the next option, add bonds. This option creates controller for the properties that are in 2 axes and more, not 1 axis properties, such as position, scale, particular center point, lens flare center point, pin puppets, and shape points. Well, I explained these in examples. The first layer we have is a square. We want to create a controller for its position. To do this, I don't select the layer, but I should select the property we need. So click on the position and click add bonds. As you click on it, a new layer is made, and in effect control you can specify its color and size. I enlarge its size to be seen. As you see, if I move this controller, the position of the layer also changes with it. Well, I undo that. Now we go to the scale and we want to create a bone for it. Then I enlarge its size to be seen. If I move this bone to the left and right, the scale of the layer will increase and decrease in x-axis. And if I move it up and down, it will do so in y-axis. The other use of add bone is that you can create a bone for a particular center point. To do this, we go to the layer section. We should select from here, not from effect control window. We go to emitter, select position XY, go to the tweak, and click add bonds. I enlarge its size so that it can be seen. Now when I move it, the particle also moves with it. The same things can be done in the lens player. We go to lens player, select player center and click add bonds. I enlarge its size. As you see, if I move this, the lens player also is linked to it. Well, another use of add bonds is to create controllers for path bond as well as handles. For example, I select the shape layer and then select its path and click add bonds. As you see, it creates controller for both the point and the handles, and each of these handles and point has a separate layer, as the points are set in orange and the handles in green. Another point. If we want to create bonds only for the points of the shape, not its handles, what should we do? To do this, we first select the path, hold Ctrl key and click add bonds. As you see, it creates bonds only for the points of the path, and it sets its color red as default. To specify different colors randomly to the bonds, first we select the path and then hold Alt key before clicking on add bonds. As you see, now the colors change. So I undo that, and if I hold Alt key and click on add bonds again, you see the colors change again. This option is often used when you want the bone of the left hand to be in one color and the right hand in another. Well, we go to the other use of add bonds, which is its common use in rigging the character. When the character's hand is made in one layer, we need to use pin puppets for animating it. In order to create bonds for the pin puppets, we should select them all. So we go to the puppet, mesh, deform, and select them all. Then we click on add bonds button. So it creates a bond for each of pin puppets. If we want to create bonds and rig them manually or use auto rig, we should first parent the bonds. This should be parented to the wrist, and the wrist to the elbow, and the elbow to the shoulder. And first we select the shoulder bone, then the elbow, the wrist, and then we go to the tweak and click auto rig. As you see, it creates a controller you can use to move the hand. Well, the elbow's direction is not correct, so we go to the effect control panel and check the reverse option. As you see, now character's hand is rigged properly. So let's correct the rotation of the wrist. Well, we go to the add bond setting, click on it and enter. As you see, these options are the same as those of edit option in the structure panel. So this is for sizing, this is for changing its color, this is for sampling, and this is for applying the sample, and this is the appearance. That's as I said before, delete all expression of the bones and you can no longer change their color and size. In this part we go to the next option, parent link. This option allows you to parent a layer to several layers at different times. Let me explain in the examples. In this example, I want to parent the circle to the blue square to move with it. To do this, I select the circle layer and click parent link. When I click on it, an effect is created for the circle in effect control window with the name parent link. In layer item, I specify which layer is chosen as parent. Well, I choose the blue square, that's my third layer, and I have named it x-axis. So I select it, let's see how it is. As you see, it's properly parented to the square. Now I want the circle when it's reached here to be parented to a yellow square and no longer parented to the blue square here on. Two ways I can try. The first one, I can select the circle layer again, and in the panel I apply parent link. And the second one, I duplicate this effect in effect controls panel, so I press Ctrl D and select y-axis layer. That's the second layer. So if I play, The circle follows this one and this one too. The circle moves forward and down, but I don't want it. I want it to move with this, up to here and with the yellow square here on. To do this, we should use weights option. It determines the degree of dependence of this layer. For example, if I set weight to 0 in the second effect where the circle is parented to the yellow square, it no longer follows the yellow square. As you see, it doesn't follow the yellow square. It moves up to here, then we go a frame back, and here we create a keyframe as the weight is 0, and then we go a frame forward and set it to 100. So that the layer will be parented to this layer. As you see, up to here nothing happens, and from here on it comes up but it still follows the blue square. To avoid this, we select the circle layer and press U key. Let's zoom in a bit to be able to see the keyframes. We need to add a keyframe for the weight of the first effect where the circle follows the blue square. Up to here the weight is 100, and a frame forward we set it to 0. Then again we press U key so that the keyframes can be seen. Let me zoom back a bit. Up to here it moves with the blue square, and from here on it follows the yellow square. Well, another option to say is inheritance, that allows to specify in which properties the circle layer follows the square. Position and rotation, or only one of them, or none of them at all. As you see, nothing happens here. But when I check position, it moves like this. That's very simple. The next option is parent across comps. This tool allows you to control a layer with a layer outside of its comp. For example, I've created a comp that contains this blue square. As you see, when I go to this comp, here is only a blue square. And when I go to the main comp, there is a blue square comp and poly layer. Now I want to parent this blue square to the poly layer. Well, to parent this square in another comp to the poly layer in the main comp, first we go to the comp and select child layer. And then click on parent across comps. Then, here in parent across comps, we select the comp containing the parent layer. Click on the left of this option. As you see, the comp containing the parent layer is A. So, here we select comp A, and here we select parent layer, poly. Then we click on the layer that's to be the child layer and click parent button. By clicking on parent button, it creates its own layer to do this operation properly. It creates a null in this comp and a locator in the main comp with which you can specify the parent layer that I'll explain. You see, if I select and move the poly layer, the child layer will follow it, while the square is in another comp. The other point is that in effect control of the locator layer, you can specify which layer to be the parent layer and change it. I create another layer, for example, and I set its anchor point in its center and bring it below the locator. Now in effect control, I select a new layer as the parent layer. Since the locator position was moved, the square position also changed. But I mean to show you that the parent layer could also be changed. Well, you can do this operation reversely. Let me press Ctrl Z to show you. For example, we want to parent the poly layer in the main comp to the square layer which is in the pre-comp. So we select the poly layer. We go to the parent across comp panel, and here we should specify comp B because we want the poly layer to follow the layer that's in comp B. And here it's selected, rec, that's okay. Now we select the poly and then parent. So if I move the poly layer, the square doesn't move anymore. But if I rotate the square layer, you can see the poly layer rotate with it. or if I change the position, the poly will change with it. Well, here remain two options which are used to do this operation manually that I don't recommend because working with them is somehow complex and it's better you use the method I mentioned before. The next option is path constraint. This tool allows you to move a layer like this arrow along the path. Let's see how it's work. We click on path constraint. First, we should select the path we want the layer to move along. Let's use this path. First select the path and then click pick path. Here it says select the layer you want to move along the path. Then you should select the arrow layer and click create button. As you click on it, an effect called path constraint is applied to the arrow layer so that you can control it. As you see, if I change this value, it moves along the path, but it's not exactly on the path. So let's place it exactly on the path. When it reaches to 100, it reaches the end of the path. And if it passes 100, the cycle is repeated again. Well, to create an animation for it, we add a keyframe to the beginning and another to second 2, and set its value to 100. Let's see the keyframes. We select the layer and press U key. As you see, when you set it to 100, it forms a full cycle, so it returns to its first place. To make it stop at the end, you should not set it to 100, but you should set it to 99 or 99.9. You can see it moves and stops at the end. The next point to note is that if we want the arrow to move oriented along the path, we should right click on the arrow layer and in transform, in auto orient, we enable orient along the path. Now let's correct its rotation. If you see now it's moved properly oriented along the path. The only problem with path constraint is that when it reaches the end of the path, its rotation returns to its default state that's 0. That's a real problem. Of course, it's to say that you can easily do the operation of path constraint by create nodes from path script, which After Effects CC 2018 has by default. Let me press Ctrl Z to turn the setting to the first state. You only have to select your path, run create nodes from path script, and then click trespass option. After it's applied, it creates a node that moves along your path and you don't need to move it and apply auto orient anymore because it has also auto orient by default. And if you want your arrow layer to move along the path, it's just parent it to the node. As you see, it moves. We can also correct its rotation to move oriented along the path. Its speed is a bit high, so here you can change its keyframes. Also its loops, and here you can uncheck the loop so it doesn't loop anymore. In this part we want to talk about the position constraint. This option is a tool to parent the position of a layer to another layer along with some other features. Well, let's go to our example. Now I want to parent upper star to lower star. To do this, I select this layer and click position constraint. As I click on it, the effect of position constraint is applied to upper layer, and here you can specify which layer it follows. For example, I want it to follow the lower star, so I select the lower star. If I try to move this, you can see no changes are made in the upper star. It's because this tool works when you've created keyframe on the parent layer or have animated it. And I create a keyframe here, and at the second 2, I bring it here. It doesn't yet follow this. Why? Because its weight is 0. I set it to 100. As you see, the lower star follows the same path as the upper star does. Since it has keyframes, now any movement I make, this layer follows it as well. Another point to note is that weight option has also other features. For example, you can specify the degree of following, and by setting it to 50 for the child layer, you specify half the movement of the parent layer to it. As you see, this moves up to here, but the other moves half the path. Or you can double the speed. Let's go to the next option, that's orientation constraint. This option is exactly the same as position constraint, with only the difference that in previous option following was in position, but here it's in rotation. In this example, I want to parent the right wheel to the left one. First, I select the child layer and click on orientation constraint. Here you specify which layer is the parent layer. Now its weight is 100, that is follows the exact movement as this does. For example, when I rotate this, the other also rotates. It doesn't need to have animation like position constraint anymore. Let me show the rotation of this layer. If this is 162, that is also 162. Let's set the weight to 200. Now this wheel rotates 2 times faster than the other. For example, if I set it to 100, as you see, this will be 200. You see, the speed of the right wheel is 2 times faster than the left wheel. The next tool we should explain is Add List. This tool allows you to create several animations for one property, or to apply several animations on one property. Now let me go to the example to explain. So I select the ball layer and press P key so that its position will be shown. I select the position and click on Add List. As I click on this option, the ball layer goes to the left up corner of the scene. Why? Because this option sets the position 0 and makes 5 values for it. For example, if I change the first value, the ball moves. And if I change the second value, again the ball begins to move. The ball layer is linked to every 5 values, and you can animate each value separately and apply animations of all 5 values to your layer. Well, let me undo that. To avoid this, and when you apply add list to the position, your layer goes to the corner of the scene, you should create a keyframe for the position and then click on add list. As you see, it doesn't move anymore because the keyframe is considered for the first value. Well, I press U key, so my keyframe is shown. I bring the keyframe to the first frame and try to create a simple animation of the ball. Excuse me, we go 10 frames forward and bring the keyframes here. Again, we back to the first frame and place the ball on the ground. Next, we go 10 frames forward and copy and paste the 2 keyframes. Again, we go 10 frames forward and copy and paste the keyframes. Then again, 10 frames forward, and the end, the ball should be placed on the ground again. Well, we want to create a simple animation for this ball. To make the ball animation appear slightly more realistic, we select the keyframes in which the ball is up, and by motion to script erase them. As you see, we created a simple animation for the first value of the list. We want the ball while jumping to move from the left to the right of the scene. To do this, we go to the second value and bring the ball to the left of the scene. Well, here's fine. Then we create a keyframe for it at the first frame. Now we go to the last keyframe of the first value and bring it to the other side of the scene and place it here. Let me press U key to see the keyframes. Now let's see how is our animation. I want the ball while jumping and moving to the right to go up the stairs as well. To do this, I go to the third value, add a keyframe here, and bring the ball up on the last keyframe. Again, I press U key to see our keyframes. You see how simply you can create such an animation. Well, to delete the effect, first we go to the position and press Alt and left click. So the expression will be deleted, and then we delete its effect. The next use of this option is when you want to create several expressions on one property. Now I want to create sign animation by an expression. First I write the expression. Let's see how the ball is animated. Now I want to add a wiggle expression to it. To do this, the easiest way is to select the position and click on Add List. As we select the position and click on Add List, the expression you wrote here is applied to the first value. So you can see what I wrote is applied here. Now we want the ball while waving in the sinusoidal motion to wiggle as well. To do this, we go to the second value and write in its value wiggle. As you see, the ball does this two motion. Also, it's to note that when you apply add list to a position or any other property, any animation or keyframe you create for that property no longer will be applied. The next option is add 0. For every property you select and click on this option, it sets the value to 0 while preserving the positions. So, when this option is used, for example, when after several animating and moving the arm of your character, you want to return it to its original position. Well, here I've made just once moving, so it quickly returned to its first position by once pressing Ctrl Z. But after many hours working on it, it can return to its original state just by once pressing Ctrl Z. Rather, it may ruin your animation and finally it won't return to its original state. That's why this option is designed. For example, I show the position of this arm. As you see, the position of this controller is at 693 and 353. So no one could remember this number to return it to its position. To easily return the parts and controllers of the character to their first position, this option can help you to do this. So I select the position and click on Add 0. As you see, the position is set to 0. And now, no matter how many times you have animated this arm, even after hours of work, you can easily return the controller or parts of your character to their first position by adding zeros to the positions. Well, the next option is lock property, and it's used for locking properties. For example, now I don't want this arm to move, so I first select its related property and then click lock property button. To remove lock property expression, just hold Alt and click on a stopwatch, so you can change the property of that arm again. Well, we reached the automation panel. The first option we have here is list, which is exactly the same as the add list option in link and constraint panel we explained before in details. Well, we return to automation panel, so the second option is wiggle. It creates wiggle animation for the properties we need, such as position, scale or rotation. So I select the circle layer, press P key and select its position, and click on wiggle. When you click on it, your selected position becomes red. That means it has expression. Let's go to effect control panel. As you see, it's created an effect. Now if I play, nothing happens, because the values of amplitude and frequency are 0. Well, the first option is amplitude, which specifies the range of the wiggle motion. For example, I set it to 10. Also, frequency is the rate of the repetition of the motion amplitude per second. Well, I set it to 5. If I play it, you see this layer is wiggling. Now I want to increase its amplitude. So I set it to 100. As you see, the speed is the same now, but its movement increases. Now I want to increase its speed, so I set it to 20 and increase the movement repetition or frequency. As you see, the speed increases. Well, let's return them to low values. The next item is loop duration, where S represents seconds. This specifies the duration in which the wiggle of the layer will be looped. Well, let me first increase this value to make it clear. Then I set and limit the work area on 2 seconds and play. As you see, when the animation repeats, it has jump and is not looped. If you see now, my circle is here at second 2. But when I go to the first frame, the circle moves. So it turns out that it's not looped. To loop the wiggle of the layer in 2 seconds, we come here and type 2. That means it will be looped in 2 seconds. Well, now we go to the last frame and then click on the first frame. As you see, nothing changed, so it's looped. Well, the next item is link dimension. This item is mostly used when you want to apply a wiggle to the scale. I select the scale of the layer and click wiggle. We go to effect controls panel. Let me disable this effect so that only the scale has a wiggle effect. I set 50 for amplitude and 25 for frequency. Now the wiggle effect specifies different values for each of x and y axis for the scale separately and doesn't link them together, so it causes the ball to become deformed. To avoid this, I'll use link dimension. Now all axes in one property change the same, so the ball gets large and small normally. Well, let's return to the position to explain the rest of the options. Complexity option makes wiggle motion become more complex. For example, if I set it to 10, its wiggle increases a bit. As you see, it makes the wiggle become more complex. Multiplier is used for multiplying the value of complexity option. For example, now it's 0.5, let's set it to 1 to see how it's become. You see how it's moved when it's 0.5, but if we set it to 1, it multiplies its complexity. Well, random seed option is for when you want to have another layer with the same animation to move differently. For example, if I want to create another circle and apply random seed to it, I should not duplicate from this. Because if I duplicate and bring it this side, you see it's the same as the first layer, and no matter how much I increase or decrease their values, nothing changes. And in fact, the expression of the second layer is connected to the first layer. To avoid this and to have a layer just like this one with the same values but different movements, we first duplicate the layer and then delete its expressions. Then we specify a wiggle to its position and enter the exact values of the former layer in it. As you see, the animations are exactly the same, but the second cycle is not connected to the first one. So we can change its random seed value. This method is a bit difficult, but it seems to be the bulk of this script. Well, let's go to the setting of wiggle option. We click on this circle, and here we have two options. The first one is collapse dimensions, that by clicking its left side, two options will be displayed. One is collapse dimensions we saw, and the other separate dimensions. Let me hide these two layers and come to work on this one. This option allows you to specify a wiggle separately to each of axes. For example, if I select collapse dimensions, it's the default mode that creates a wiggle effect for its position and controls both axes together. Let me undo that and select separate dimensions. When you choose this option, it creates a controller for each axis separately. As you see, now you can enter a separate value for x-axis of the wiggle and one for y-axis as well. Or you can assign the wiggle just for x value and no more need to wiggle y value. So let me undo that and go to the next option. The next option is unique control. This option allows you to create a controller for several properties such as position and scale, or an effect for each property separately. Well, let me explain the example. For example, I want to create a wiggle for both position and scale of the square layer. Let me select collapse dimensions as the default mode. Well, I select the position and scale of the layer, enable unique control and click create. As you see, it creates an effect for both position and scale. So I increase this value a bit. As you see, both position and scale of this layer have a wiggle. Well, to create a separate effect for each of the position and scale properties, I select individual controls, and after selecting both properties, and then click create. As you see, an effect is created for the scale and one for the position separately. The next tool is swing. This tool creates a sign function for property. Well, let's go to the example. First, we select the position of the layer and click swing. As you see, by clicking on it, an effect of position swing is created in Effect Controls window. This also, just like wiggle, has an amplitude for the range of the motion, frequency for repetition per second, offset, and other features that I shall explain. For example, I set it to 10 and this to 2. 10 is low, so I set it to 100. As you see, it creates a sinus motion, up and down. Well, we've also explained frequency. In offset option, you can specify where the start of the motion is, the lowest point or the highest. You can specify where the layer begins to move, at the start point or at the end. Well, is option. When it's 0, makes the animation move smoothly. But if you increase this value, for example, when it's set to 3, it causes your animation to be shown 1 frame in every 3 frames. To set it to 0 is much better, so that it moves smoothly. Angle specifies the angle of the sinus motion. Now it moves toward this angle. Let me now change the angle. Every angle you give it, it moves toward that angle. Well, the other use of swing tools is for the cases, for example, you want to animate the clock layer pendulum without creating any keyframes for it or knowing any expressions. To start, place the anchor point of the clock layer pendulum at the center of the clock, select its rotation, and click swing. Set this to 5 and this one to 1. Let's see how it moves. You see how simply it was done. Now the amplitude of the motion is a bit low, so let's increase it. Its speed or frequency is high, so let's decrease it. As you see, without creating any keyframes or writing a specific expressions, we created an infinite loop motion. Let's go to the next option, that's wheel. This tool creates an automatic rotation for the layer. For example, I select this layer and click wheel button. You see, when I move this layer, it automatically rotates and its rotation depends on the distance or pixel it passes, not the animation speed. For example, let me show the position of this layer. Create a keyframe here and another one at second 2. Then bring the layer to the right of the scene. Let me zoom in a bit. As you see, when the layer reached second 2, its rotation reached to 2 and 348 degrees. Now, if I bring this closer, the rotation is still at 2 and 348. So it doesn't depend on the speed of rotation, but the distance it moves. So let's go to the effect control. The first option is radius. This option indicates the radius of your layer object. Well, as you know, the greater the radius of a wheel, the less its rotation speed, and the smaller the radius, the faster the speed. Well, we said that by moving from this side to the other side of the scene, the layer rotates 2 whole rotation and 348 degrees. Now I set it to 150, that means I increase the radius of the layer. As you see, when the radius increases, the rotation rate decreases. So the rotation rate decreased, and if the radius decreases, naturally the speed will increase. Well, the point is how we can find the radius of the star to enter here and give it a speed proportionate to the radius of the layer. So, what should we do to find the radius of the layer? First, we place the anchor point of the layer at its center, and then we create a null object and place its anchor point on the farthest pixel of this layer. So we put it here. Then we select both layer, enter Duik, Tools menu, and click Measure Distance. By clicking this option, it shows the distance between the two layers. Here, it's 66 pixels. It means the distance from the anchor point of this layer to that of the null object is 66 pixels. Well, we don't need the null anymore. We select the star layer, go effect control window and set the radius to 66. Because 66 is precisely the correct radius of this layer. The second option is reverse, which reverses the rotation. Then we reach the third option, that's the trajectory. Here we determine for wheel tool what trajectory you should rotate moving on. In trajectory there are two options, horizontal and curved. The first option determines for wheel tool that the layer should rotate when it's moving on a horizontal trajectory. As you see now, it moves on a horizontal trajectory. Let me set it down. No rotation movement is done. Why? Because the trajectory is not horizontal anymore. Well, let me undo that. The next option is curve. This option computes both horizontal and vertical movements. As the trajectory is horizontal, the layer rotates. When it's vertical, as you see, it also rotates. On all kind of trajectory, even curved ones, it also rotates. Let's go to the next option, that is randomize. This tool is used to randomize various properties, layers, keyframes, and many other things. Let's click on it and enter. The first option here is current values. If you click on its left side, three other options will be displayed. The first of them is current values, that's for randomizing properties such as position, scale, and opacity. Layer is for randomizing layers in the timeline and their movements. Keyframes is also clear, that's for randomizing the keyframes of various properties. So we start with the first option, that's current values. As I said, this option for randomizing the layer properties such as position, scale, and rotation. Now I set the X position of the layer to 600 and the Y position to 300 to make it clear how our settings will be applied. So current values is selected. In min and max section we set the change we want to apply to property. As you see, all are 0 as default. For this option, separate dimension is selected, and for this one, offset current values, which I'll explain. Well, first I select the layer property and click randomize. You see, when I click randomize, nothing happens because its min and max aren't set, so no change happen. Well, for example, I set for x min minus 50 and for x max 50 and the same values for y axis. That's randomize tool adds or radius a number randomly from minus 50 to 50 for the layer values. So I selected the position and then click randomize. Now you see it adds 45 to x value and subtracts about 15 from y value. So it becomes 252. And it's specified for each axis a specific value. That's because the separate dimensions is selected. But if we select collapse dimensions, both x and y axes will be chained the same. Well, let me turn this to their initial state. Then I select the position as collapse dimensions is selected, and these are the previous values. As you see now, 48 is added to x-axis and the same amount to y-axis. So this option specifies for both axes the same value, and mostly is used when you want to randomize the scale of the layer so it doesn't become deformed. If I select collapse dimensions and apply it to the scale, you see its size will change properly. But if I select separate dimensions and then select the scale and click randomize, it will become deformed and it's not so good. So we go to the last option, that's offset current values and absolute values. So what does it do? To make it clear, let me select collapse dimensions, so both values will be changed the same. Offset current values randomly adds or radius a number between the values you entered in the min and max to the property you selected. Well, I've entered minus 50 and 50, and as the position is selected, I select offset current values and click randomize. As you can see, now it has changed from 600 to 568 and has dropped almost 32. And this also was 300 and is changed to 268, so the same amount is radius from it. But the second option, absolute values, won't consider the position values and just specify the values you entered in the min and max for the axis. That is, it specify a number between minus 50 and 50 to the position of the layer in x and y axis. Well, I select the position, set the minimum and maximum to minus 50 and 50, and as absolute values is selected, then I click randomize. As you see, now it becomes minus 3.5, which is a number between these two values. I click on it again, now it is minus 49.9. Once again, now it becomes 47. As you can see, it specifies a number between these two numbers for x and y axis for the layer. But to specify a separate value for each of the axes, I select separate dimensions and set y values to minus 10 and 90. So if I click randomize, y-axis of the position will be 15, which is a number between these values, and x-axis will be 29, which also is a number between those values. And it's not like the offset current values to add these numbers to our current values. Well, let's go to the next option, that's layers. When we select layers, 4 options are displayed that each one randomizes the layers in a specific way. The first option is times, which causes the layers to move in the timeline. Just like what I did, but it does this randomly. Well, let me select this option. In this option, the min and max of y and z axis don't work, and only the min and max of x axis are specified for the layers. For example, I wanna set the minimum to 0, 0 means the frame 0, and the maximum to 30. That is, a number between 0 and 30 frame is specified to randomize my layers. Also, it's to note that in randomizing the layers, the options separate dimensions and collapse dimensions don't work, but this option works, which I'll explain in the example. So I set them into 0 and the max to 30 frame, select the layers and click randomize. As you can see, it randomizes my layers from 0 to 30 frames. So the beginning of this layer is at frame 8, the second layer at frame 15, and the third layer at frame 10. And if I click randomize again, this tool sets the beginning of the layer as the 0th frame and moves the layer between 0 to 30 frames forward, because offset current values is selected. As you can see, each time I click randomize, the layer moves more to forward. So notice, the second layer is now at frame 46, while I've set it from 0 to 30 frames. Well, I return them to their first status, then select absolute values. I want them to be randomized between 0 to 30 frames. So I select absolute values and click randomize. As you can see, the third layer is the foremost layer at frame 30. And if I click randomize again, it won't move forward anymore and will be randomized in the same range between frame 0 to 30. The next option is in points. This option doesn't move the layers, but it moves their beginnings, just like what I do. And in this case, the animation definitely won't be moved. Well, now I select these three layers, and as in points is selected, 0 to 30, absolute values, and click randomize. As you can see, now the layers won't move anymore, but their beginnings move. Why? Because the keyframes remain still unmoved. Now, if I click randomize again, you see that the keyframes won't move, and only the beginnings of the layers will be randomized from frames 0 to 30. Well, let's go to the next option, that's out points. Out points option has exactly the same feature of in points, except it does this work from the end. For example, we want our layers to be randomized from frame 85 to the end of the comp, that's 100. Now I select the layers, out points, absolute values, and click randomize. As you can see, now the randomization operation is done between frames 85 to 100. Well, the next option is indices. This option allows you to change the order of your layers, just like what I do. This tool does this randomly. To do this, select the three layers, select indices, and click randomize. As you can see, the order of the layers is changed, and to do this several times, you can set this value to 4. This value isn't so accurate, so if you couldn't change the layer order, you can specify more or less value for it till the random operation is done. Well, let's go to the third option, that's keyframes. Keyframes has two options called times and values. Times option randomizes keyframes in the time span. Now for time, we only use x-axis. I want to move them from frame 0 to 40. So let's click randomize. As you see now, all keyframes move between frame 0 to 40. Well, I press Ctrl Z and undo that. So the next option is values. This option will change the values of your keyframes. For example, I select these keyframes. In this example, I have given the same values to all keyframes to become clear the change of keyframes when I randomize them. Now I select these three keyframes, set x values 0 and 20, and click randomize. As you can see, it randomly adds a number between 0 and 20 to x-axis. To change y-axis values, I set them between 0 to 20. Then I select keyframes and click randomize. As you can see, both x and y axes will change.